And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people, that they're the children of Israel, they're the Judeans. You know, so what are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is, most likely there is something there. And most likely, maybe that they were the original Israelites, and maybe that the Jewish people today who are white, Caucasian people came in a little bit later on.
Hitler was, and the Nazis, of course, expanded on Margaret Sanger's approach to eugenics, right? Eugenics was a movement that was born in the United States under hard doctrines of racism with the intent of eliminating the tribe of Judah in the African-American community in this country, right? To eliminate them. That's why she formed Planned Parenthood, was specifically to kill African-American, Black Americans. That's why she did it.
So they had a high degree of endogamy and avunculate marriage. And avunculate marriage is where an uncle marries their niece. All right? And so when you have that going on and you don't marry outside your group, what happens is those genetics get concentrated and things like genetic diseases start to emerge, like Tay-Sachs, sickle cells, one of them. And so usually when they're pointing out that, like, okay, well, by DNA I'm Jewish, is that what they're saying is mitochondrially they relate to one of those four women. And most of those genetic tests that they're taking, first of all, they're not taking them in Israel because you have to have you have to be approved by the court to get the test for certain reasons. So if you're going to you can't just take a 23andMe in Israel. You have to go outside the country.
That's interesting.
To take the test.
Interesting.
Okay. And so these people that are taking these Jewish people that are taking these 23andMe's and uploading it to TikTok or whatever social media platform, a lot of times what you'll see is it'll say that they're 98% Ashkenazi Jewish and 100% European.
I'm about to show you something extremely controversial. It's even illegal in the state of Israel to obtain this. And if you do obtain it, it's illegal to show it and or talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, my DNA. Now, I bet you thought it was going to be a lot crazier than that, right? Now, you might ask yourself, why is it illegal to obtain this in the state of Israel? Because it proves through your DNA that Jews around the world have no ancestral ties to the land of Israel. But according to Israeli law, the fact that I have Jewish blood gives me more right to somebody's home and land in the land of Palestine than somebody that has been there for hundreds of years. Doesn't make sense.
But the question is, where is the Semitic DNA? They shouldn't be 100% European and 98% Ashkenazi at the same time. But the thing is, that genetic DNA is that maternal DNA that they're saying is Ashkenazim is European.
Yeah. It's interesting, too. Blacks in general have been targeted by eugenicists almost the hardest.
Well, part of the reason why Hitler was kind of motivated for the final solution, he, in Mein Kampf, trying to think of the page, I want to say it's like 624, whatever. I'll have to look it up and give you the accurate page number.
Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler, page 624. Only in France does there exist today more than ever an inner unanimity between the intentions of the Jew-controlled stock exchange and the desire of the chauvinist-minded national statesmen But in this very identity, there lies an immense danger for Germany. For this very reason, France is and remains by far the most terrible enemy. This people, which is basically becoming more and more niggerified, constitutes in its tie with the aims of Jewish world domination an enduring danger for the existence of the white race in Europe. For the contamination by Negro blood on the Rhine in the heart of Europe is just as much in keeping with the perverted, sadistic thirst for vengeance of this hereditary enemy of our people as is the ice-cold calculation of the Jew thus to begin bastardizing the European continent at its core and to deprive the white race of the foundations for a sovereign existence through infection with lower humanity. What France, spurred on by her own thirst for vengeance and systematically led by the Jew, is doing in Europe today is a sin against the existence of white humanity, and someday will incite against this people all the avenging spirits of a race which has recognized racial pollution as the original sin of humanity.
But in Mein Kampf, he said that, well, he basically was blaming the Jews for niggerifying the Rhineland. So he blamed them for bringing in the Negroes into the Rhineland and contaminating. He saw black people as basically a biological weapon.
J.A. Rogers, Nature Knows No Color Line, page 130. The Eastern Jews who settled in Austria, Poland, and Russia were Negroid too. Count Adam Gwarski of Poland, who visited the United States in 1857, said the Jews of his country strongly resembled American mulattoes. Numbers of Jews, he said, have the greatest resemblance to the American mulattoes. Shallow complexion, thick lips, crisp black hair. Of all the Jewish population scattered over the globe, 1/4 dwells in Poland. I am therefore well acquainted with their features. On my arrival in this country, America, I took every light-colored mulatto for a Jew. Considerable Negro strain was found too among the Polish Jews in London. Adam G. de Gorowski, America and Europe, page 177. Numbers of Jews have the greatest resemblance to the American mulattoes. Shallow carnation complexion, thick lips, crisp black hair. Of all the Jewish population scattered over the globe, 1/4 dwells in ancient Poland. I am therefore well acquainted with their features. On my arrival in this country, America, I took every light-colored mulatto for a Jew. Could not these Jewish mulattoes have descended from some crossing between the Jews and the Egyptians at a time previous to the Exodus? J. A. Rogers, Nature Knows No Color Line, page 130. Karl Marx, who bore a strong resemblance to Frederick Douglass, undoubtedly came of this Negro stock. His nose was broad, his hair frizzy, and his color so dark he was called the Moor. Negro strain was ever more evident in Ferdinand Lassalle, aristocratic founder of socialism. Marx, his rival, called him a Jewish nigger, a greasy Jew from Breslau, who was always concealing his woolly hair with all kinds of hair oil and makeup. In a letter to Engels, March 7, 1856, he said of Lassalle, "It is perfectly obvious from the shape of his head and the way his hair grows that he is descended from Negroes."
He got his eugenics from American apartheid, or the Jim Crow South, the chattel slavery that was here, and basically their miscegenation laws. And so he's applying that, in the was 1930s to 1948. He's applying that to the Jews, and he's angry at them for doing that, among other things. And there was actually a coin. You can look this up. It's in German, but you can type in "Shame of the Rhineland" or "the Shame on the Rhine." It's a 1920 coin where they have on one side they have an African soldier's head with a helmet on. Mm-hmm. On the other side, it's a BBC, a big black dick with a German woman bound with her arms behind her back and tied to it.
Mm.
What is this called?
If you just look at the number of views on these videos, these interracial videos on these adult websites, they get an insane amount of views. Especially the interracials with a black man, or the other cases if it's an interracial with an Asian woman. These videos get unbelievable amount of views. And then listen, many of these guys they won't admit to these. I'm just telling you guys a 100% fact, okay? And in fact, it's not just the Western man, okay? Most of the guys in China, they talk about black penises all the time. I'm just telling you, they talk about it almost every single day. And this is one of the many theories that's floating around in China about the black penis. Well, they're saying that, okay, how come, when these guys are watching the NBA, they're saying that how come you never see Chinese guys grow this big? Okay, how can these black guys in the United States, in the NBA, how can they be so massive? And how come 60 to 70% of these black professional athletes, how come they only date snow bunnies? So why is that? So one of the theories they came up with is that, how the blacks in America, how they got so big. They're saying that, back 200 years ago, the black slaves, the really small and skinny and short ones, okay, the really weak ones, obviously they couldn't do as much work on the field, so the slave owners obviously didn't want them, so they were systematically starved and eliminated. And obviously, think about it from the slave owner's perspective, that person is going to want to make as much profit as possible. And who is going to make you the most profit? The really, really huge, the muscular, the tallest, the biggest black dudes on the plantation. They're the ones that's going to make you wealthy, right? So it only makes sense for these guys, the alphas, what do they call them? The Tyrones. So only makes sense for the slave owners, for these Tyrones to reproduce. So every single generation, for hundreds of years, these slave owners, they picked out the Tyrones to sleep with all the black women. So many of these guys, the biggest, the baddest, the slaves, they could impregnate dozens of black women at the same time. And the next generation of slaves that these Tyrones produce, they're going to be much bigger, they're going to be taller, they're going to be more muscular, they're going to be stronger, so that this way they can get more work done on the plantation. And this went on for many, many generations. That's why the blacks in America keep on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And obviously this goes out without saying, it's not just that their forelimbs are getting bigger, their third leg is also getting bigger. And it's not just the length and the girth, obviously. So this thing here, this is roughly about 7 inches, okay? Understand, for many women, okay, the girth is more important than the length. Although this one's quite girthy. So many of these Chinese guys, they're also saying that, the black penis has more durability. They're saying that this is because generally on average, an African male has a much higher bone density versus Europeans and Asians. So many of these Chinese guys, they're saying that because, these African males, they have a higher bone density. That means that their third leg can be twice as hard and durable during a erection. So when they're penetrating a girl, they can give that woman a full body shaking experience. It's almost like they can send them into epilepsy or go into a full body seizure mode. And that's why so many of these snow bunnies, they like to sleep around with these black professional athletes. Okay, I did not make up these stories, okay? Many of these guys, they won't admit to it. Okay, they're embarrassed to talk about it. They're ashamed about it. Listen, white guys and Asian guys, they talk about the black penis all the time. All the time. Every single black man in history that has been lynched in the United States. And it's not just black men. Many of these men that were hanged, many of these guys were teenagers and sometimes infants. For example, Emmett Till. I'm sure many of you guys are aware of what happened to Emmett Till, right? Every single one of these black men that was falsely lynched by these rich white slave owners, okay? 99% of the time, these lynchings happened because these white men believed the lies of a white woman. Because these white women lied to their white husbands. That's why these black men got lynched in the southern United States. And that is a 100% fact. This is why you should never, ever trust the words of a feminist.
So it's called the Shame on the Rhine coin. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go.
Wow,
Click
look at that.
on that right there.
That's insane.
Yeah, I'll find one that isn't a.
This is their
I mean,
currency,
this is-
or what was this?
So, so it says Die Schwartz. Basically, on this side right here, the side where you see the penis and the woman,
Yeah.
it says the black shame. And then it says on the other side, the obverse side, it says the watch on the Rhine.
1920.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So he was furious with the Jews for nigrifying Germany.
Listen, white guys and Asian guys, they talk about the black penis all the time. All the time.
So in the United States, a lot of the miscegenation laws, which were basically being broken by Southern plantation owners, but continued actually up in, like, they weren't all knocked down in each state because of states' rights into, like, in the 1970s. But in the United States, they wanted to keep the races separate and genetically separate. But at the same time, you had plantation owners sleeping with their female slaves on the regular. So producing this mixed race of people who would emerge. Well, a lot of them were the free people of color before slavery ended. And so they became like the black elite. And not all of them, but a good majority of them despised the blacks that were freed from slavery later on and wanted to be separate from them. But it was from their ranks that the so-called black slave owners emerged. It's from this mixed group of people.
Huge differences in American. So a lot of people be like, yeah, but once they came to the United States, they all intermixed. And it's like, this is functionally not true. For example, the descendants of the escaped slaves that moved to the north versus the slaves that were freed and then moved to the north basically exist as two populations that for a long time didn't intermarry and didn't like each other.
Once two youngins go down the hill to the dollhouse where Master Kilpatrick's children are playing. They want to go into the dollhouse when one of Mr. Kilpatrick's boys say, "This here for white folk children." They say, "We ain't no niggers. We got the same daddy you has. And he comes to see us nearly every day and fetches us clothes and things from town. They just a fussing, and Mrs. Kilpatrick is listening to them out her chamber window. She heard them white niggers say, 'He our daddy. We call him daddy when he comes to our house to see our mama.'"
My granddad had a lot of land. So yeah, the whole like slave lineage, my great granddad was a slave and no, a slave owner. I'm sorry. And ended up raping one of the women. And so we come from like that lineage, and that land and that plot of land ended up staying with the family because the guy who was a white guy who was a slave owner, of course, and having a relationship and with one of the slaves and mistresses, whatever you want to call her. And somehow that land, because he loved her, got inherited to our family. And he has a bunch of land out there. And yeah.
So, and a lot of those mixed, like I was telling you before, ended up passing for white, which, I mean, like when you only have 1/64th Negro ancestry,
Yeah.
Not much.
you know, you're basically Elizabeth Warren,
Yeah.
you know? And so, yeah. And a lot of those families that did pass try to hide it. And these stories come out every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they come out here in the United States, but also in Europe. Like people that thought, like, well, I did this genetic test, or like I went and found this and that. Like we had an ancestor that passed and didn't tell anyone. And basically, then they try to like, I wish I knew this history, this and that, because they find it fascinating. But also too, like the circumstances of the time that created that type of pressure for those people to pass. All right. And then created basically this this racial caste system that has never been fully dismantled here in the United States.
Yeah.
So you go from the period of 1776, July 4th, 1776. What does that mean? So your 4th of July, it's about freedom, right?
Yeah.
So for 89 years after that point, they still had chattel slavery. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And then people say that slavery was a long time ago, but some of your last people that were born into slavery died in the 1970s. I think 1975 was the last one.
Wow.
And so when you look at the scope of a person's lifespan, it's not a long time ago.
Yeah,
Right.
a couple generations.
Like they're talking about the Tulsa massacre, and like they basically shut down the reparation claims of those Tulsa survivors.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you don't need reparations for what happened. Basically, it was a pogrom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the thing is, people don't recognize these as pogroms and racial cleansings when it's directed at so-called African Americans.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, and the other reason why a lot of Americans won't criticize what modern Israel's doing, because then they have to look back in the mirror and it's like, oh, okay, well, the United States also, it became the country it is through force and claiming land that didn't belong to them.
Mm.
And that's exactly what's happening in Palestine today.
Yeah.
Our first guest is Dr. Francis Welsing. Joining me in the questioning is Richard Prince from the Washington Post. Mr. Prince has the first question.
Yes, Dr. Welsing, it's been about a year ago since you were dismissed from Howard University, and at the time I recall you charged that your crest theory, which in brief holds that whites are inferior to blacks because of the lack of melanin, was responsible for that dismissal. And I'm wondering whether you still believe that and what proof you have of that.
Well, Dick, I do believe it. I was dismissed from Howard, fired from Howard in June 1975. In November 1974, while still at Howard, I heard a rumor that I was going to be blocked from promotion and tenure because of my views, not because of my academic work. And I went immediately to the Dean of the College of Medicine, Dr. Marion Mann, and I asked him, I said, Dr. Mann, I hear that I am going to be blocked from promotion and tenure because of my views. And Dr. Mann responded, to be frank with you, Dr. Welsing, this paper that you wrote, and I said, the crest theory of color confrontation, he said yes. He went on to say that it did not make sense for me to say that white people were envious of black people because white people lack skin pigmentation. And we went on from that point. But let me make one correction. My theory does not say that whites are inferior to blacks. I don't say that. I say that whites feel that they are inferior because they cannot produce skin pigmentation and because their status as, I say, a variant of albinism is genetic recessive to blacks, and they can be genetically annihilated by non-white people, that this is what causes that sense of inadequacy, that they have built a total behavioral system that is a compensation. White supremacy is a compensation for a sense of white genetic inadequacy.
I see. One other follow-up on that, and that is what background in genetics do you have to enable you to document that theory?
Well, I'm a medical doctor, and all medical doctors receive or take courses in genetics. And this is very, very basic genetics. And it not only is very basic genetics, this is common lay knowledge. And we hear it, the dominance, the genetic dominance of black over white is heard in the expression, one drop of black blood makes you black. In other words, if you were to relate to a white female, the product of that relationship would be an individual that is identifiable as what is called non-white. They would have something, I mean, the curliness of the hair, the darkness of the skin would make the child look more like you than like the mother.
I see.
Dr. Welsing, your theory to me seems to infer some innate behavior on the part of a human being because they are, quote, black or white. Would you agree or disagree that the terms black and white are not genetic definitions? And if they are not genetic definitions, then how could your theory be true?
Well, wait a minute. When you say genetic definitions, I'm not quite sure what you say, but for the sake of time, the factors that determine whether we're going to have skin pigmentation or whether we lack skin pigmentation is based on genes. In other words, you have genes that determine the quantity of melanin pigment that is going to be produced in your skin, in your eyes, and your hair. If you have a gene, a mutation towards an inability to produce that pigment, that is also genetically determined. And that is at least within the context of the Western world, or the white supremacy culture. The dominant classification of people, not as determined by Francis Welsing, but as determined by white people themselves, is your classification. Either you are white or you are classified as non-white. This is on your birth certificate. This is on every paper of identification that you have. And this focus on skin coloration, I maintain, is based on the awareness on the people who are now in power, that they are a minority. The white group represents a minority in the world population. And the color focus is something that is a psychological, I say a psychological necessity based on a genetic reality. So I don't know if this gets to your question. Now, any other thing that one might say that results from the absence of pigment, I mean, that's another discussion. I don't know whether you want to go into that.
Well, following that logic, then, would it not be accurate to say that there would be a difference psychologically in light-skinned blacks from dark-skinned blacks?
Well, psychologically, yes, and I think that we are all aware of that. Under white supremacy, the conditioning has been the closer you are to white, the more acceptable you are. So that, for example, all of us learned as we were growing up in the black community, if you are black, stay back. If you are brown, stick around. If you are yellow, you're mellow, and if you're white, you're right. And the appreciation of an individual, even within the black group itself, was very often based on the relative absence of skin pigmentation. And even within families, children thought that they were ugly if they were darker. And families, parents have said that to children. Even now, people want to know when a baby is just born in the hospital, some of the first questions that are asked by the black parents about the child or the black family members, is it light skin and does it have straight hair? To know how much value we're going to put on this new baby. Because within the framework of the culture in which we live, the closer you are to white, the more you're considered beautiful, and perhaps under some circumstances, the more opportunities you will have.
John Worry, Alexander, 334 to 323 BC, Conquest of the Persian Empire, page 84. Whatever the feelings of the Macedonians, Alexander certainly did not modify his plans for national fusion. He aimed not at a multiracial society, but at a fusion of culture, nation, and race. In furtherance of his ideal, he obliged his Macedonian officers to marry Oriental wives. Nobody could say that he had not set an example himself, and he had decided to make Babylon the capital of his empire. The history of the colonization of Africa by alien races. Sir Harry Johnston, page 451. No doubt, as in Asia and South America, the eventual outcome of the colonization of Africa by alien peoples will be a compromise, a dark-skinned race with a white man's features and a white man's brain.
Yeah, what are you? Dad's black, mom's white. Standard issue, pretty much.
Powerful combination genetic-wise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One
of the strongest combinations of all time.
I would say so.
Yeah, you get the body of the black man, and then you get the mind of the white man all together in some strange combination.
The whole
that doesn't, by the way, mean that black people don't have brains. It's a different brain.
What are you? Dad's black, mom's white. Standard issue, pretty much. Powerful combination genetic-wise, right? Yeah, absolutely. The strongest combinations of all time. I would say so. Yeah, you get the body of the black man, and then you get the mind of the white man all together in some strange combination. That doesn't, by the way, mean that black people don't have brains. It's a different brain.